Oh yeah, sexy biscuits. Nice.
Long boys blues, 1975. A YouTuber's on the rise. Reviewing games late at night and sometimes friends. But Long boys blues, 1975.
Hey YouTube, Lumbers Post 1975, and welcome to another nostalgic memories of video. Haven't done one of these in absolutely ages. Also, you'll have to excuse me, it's not a Fat Friday video. Apologies there was no Fat Friday video yesterday. I was at a wedding for 8 hours. But my mouth's gone, because even though this isn't a Fat Friday video, I've just had a bag of chicken wings seasoned with sea salt, pepper and chili. Why didn't I save them for a Fat Friday video? They were only a 2 chili rating, so I didn't see the point. However, they were very tasty and delicious, and they've done a number on my mouth. But this isn't a Fat Friday video, this is a nostalgic memories of video, and I want to talk about nostalgic memories of the school bus, because at least for me, the school bus was just you know, as important a part of the school day when it comes to me having, you know, warm, fuzzy, nostalgic memories of, and memories that I look back upon with, you know, a great deal of love. And also it's because I was talking to a friend of mine who has very young children, and the conversation came up of how they got to school, or they get to school now, which is, it's really local to them and they just walk to it, and how we got to school back in the day. Now obviously people could have walked to my school, but the majority of us had to get buses because my school was bang out in the middle of the countryside. This means nothing to the majority of you, but I went to Chew Valley Secondary School, and it was in Chew Magna, which in the valley. And yeah, it was bang out in the middle of the countryside. Perfect for people who, you know, or a perfect way to stop people playing truant, because if you got on your school bus and went all the way out into the middle of the countryside, and then hopped off the bus and went to play hooky until the end of the school day, there was fuck all for you to do out there. Maybe that's why they built a school there, I don't know. But because the catchment area for my school was huge, we lived out in the burbs, but it wasn't unheard of that a bunch of kids who also lived in downtown Bristol would also come to this school, despite the fact that there were schools right on their doorstep. I don't know how the catchment process works, and I'm pretty sure it's even more ridiculous these days. And it was funny because, yeah, I really enjoyed, you know, the school bus journey to school and from school. You could argue that the journey on the way to school, because you had a full, you know, what was it, 5 hours, 6 hours, I can't remember, ahead of you of schooling, if you will. So you possibly weren't in as good a mood on the way to school as you were on the way back school, where you were usually pretty euphoric, especially on a Friday night. And again, also in that, you know, I'm talking about it like that, then obviously your Monday morning trip to school was probably the one where you were in least a good mood, you know, because you were just at the start of your schooling week. I wasn't massively popular at school, I wasn't massively unpopular at school. I was a B grade kind of student. I was alright at sports, I was alright at football, I was alright. I love cross country, I actually really like cross country, especially that time when I cheated and took a shortcut and came second. That was a blinder. I was alright at football. You like athletics, not so much a fan of rugby, not my bag, baby. But the point being, yeah, alright, you know, student, reasonably popular, you know, not necessarily massively unpopular, kind of guess an in-betweener. And also, though, there were a few times that I've talked about in this series of memories, you know, nostalgic memories, where I was absolutely a god, my Japanese Mega Drive being one of them, and also Street Fighter 2 on my imported Super Famicom was another one where I was an absolute fucking legend, especially in that summer holidays. Look up the video I talk about 1992, a perfect summer for gaming. Now, yeah, the reason I want to talk about this is the school bus was interesting because it was its own little ecosystem. That's probably the wrong descriptive term. It had its own class system. You'd start as a first year, wouldn't you, at the front of the bus, slowly working your way down to your final years at school, and in the 5th year or 6th form, you would be on the back seat. I don't know if people still do that now. I don't know, how relevant school buses are these days, but that was your holy grail, to make it to the back of the bus. When you made it to the 5th year, if there were first years, second years, third years taking a piss at the back of the bus, you would expel them. They haven't earned the right to sit at the back of the bus yet. And it's cool because for the majority of my time at secondary school, our bus was a double-decker. I know, seriously. So you had two backs of the bus, and so you would kind of make it to the back of the bus at the top by the 3rd year, but by the 5th year, that was where you wanted to be, was downstairs at the back of the bus. Maybe this was just my school. Please let me know if this was similar at your school, especially if you had a double-decker bus, because apparently that wasn't that common, even in my country back in the day. And obviously I started secondary school, my God, I am old, in 1987. But also, we used to have to walk, I don't know, 250, maybe 500 yards from my parents' house, down a hill, round a corner, over a cattle grid, and then stay at the bottom of the road, because our bus, and we were the first stop as well, would come down the A38, past the airport, turn over the cattle grid, stop and pick us up. And then obviously it was, when I actually ended up being able to drive to school in 6th form before I went on to college, if I went to drive there, it would be like no more than 15 minutes, but because of the various stops you would have to get, and it would be like me having to walk down the road for, a great many other people. People had to go to these specific points along the route of the bus, which basically went for a straight line, and picked up everyone from the Felton area in about 5-6 stops, all along a straight route. And then it went through Winford, which had its own bus. Then it went through the various stops throughout the valley, sort of, Chumagna, stuff like that. Actually, if you're in Chumagna, you were fucked. You had to ride or walk to school. But it was, yeah, so we were the first stop. But I have so many memories of standing there waiting for the bus to come. And you had a rough indication of when it would arrive. Be there no later than this specific time. So we used to leave our house at 8, and we had to be there. It's no later than 10 past 8. But you never actually knew specifically when it would. There was a little bit of flexibility. They made for interesting times, especially when it was absolutely pissing down with rain or tanking wind and shit like that. There was no shelter for us whatsoever, because this wasn't an actual bus stop. This was just literally a side of the road next to an old village hall. And so the only thing we could do was stand under this tree that's still there to this day. It's hanging in there. It's seen better days. And that was the only shelter we had from the elements. And to be fair, it was pretty shit shelter. Do you remember, like, that was a big deal, the school bag you would get, perusing through the club books and get a school bag for all your books and your lunch and shit like that. And you'd always walk with it on your shoulder like this. Those were the days. I always went for the Puma option. Other people went for the head bag option. I was a Puma guy through and through. But yeah, so the thing about it that was brilliant, because at the start of my schooling career, secondary school, I was a ZX Spectrum guy. And it's funny because my best mate for the early years of school, he would come on another bus that would come out of, this means nothing to you, out of Downside, and then go past us, but it wouldn't stop for us. But at this point, that bus was full of everyone, and it was fucking horrible, because you'd have to sit there like, hi, especially when you're a first year, and this bus full of like fucking 50 kids would go by. But my best mate for the early years of there was on that bus. But my other best mate, Luke Butland, he was on our bus. And this is where like my nostalgic memories really kick in. And later on, years on from that, when we became, me and my brother became mates with my mate Carlos down the road, which is when we were all into kung fu and shit like that. Yeah, he would get on 3 stops down, Luke would get on 2 stops down. But it was just awesome, because you take your games, because you do trades at school. I've talked about this before. You do trades at school, so you would bring your Spectrum games on the bus, but more often than not, you'd be trading with people on the bus as well, and that was cool. And you could look around and see other people do it. People trading videotapes, people trading games. But I have just really nice, fuzzy memories of trading Spectrum games on the school bus. And then there's the other funny thing. You'd always see kids that would eat their entire lunch, like, on the trip to school. And like, if you had a packed lunch, then more often than not, you were not going to get a cooked dinner at school, because that was either free if you were in, a financial bracket, or you had to pay for it. But more often than not, most parents made you a packed lunch, because the school lunches were shite and overly expensive for what they were. But you see kids eating their entire packed lunch, and you'd be thinking, even as a little kid, like 12 years old, I'd be thinking, dear God, man, you've just had fucking breakfast. How are you going to make it for another 5, 6 hours? On nothing. But some people did that. And it's funny because on the way back, because at my school, you couldn't buy soft drinks. So you weren't allowed. You weren't even allowed to take soft drinks in. That's weird. People always smuggle them in, stuff like that. But basically, soft drinks. And we had a tuck shop. Soft drinks were contraband. It was water or milk. That was it. Water or milk. But if you had a packed lunch, you were allowed to take squash and stuff like that because it's 1987. My God, I feel old. But you'd have a flask and you'd take squash. But at the end of the school day, when it was particularly in summer and everyone legged it for the bus and shit like that, because these things didn't hang around, right? These things didn't hang around, and they'd be knackered and burning up and shit like that. It was always those who had beverages on the bus had the power. But anyway, back to the morning. I loved going in the morning like that, and trading games and stuff like that, and talking about what you watched the night before, which in those days was primarily like not the stuff you'd watch in the early evenings, late evenings before going to bed and stuff like that, which later on would be Quantum Leap and things like that. It would be what you watched on children's BBC and children's ITV, stuff like Mysterious Cities of Gold, Ulysses 31. They were like massive, sort of deals back then. Although some of those might have been, no, I'm pretty sure they were on children's ITV and children's BBC, but they might have been just before I went to secondary school. But that was primarily what you talked about. You talked about the shows and stuff like that. Also, you would talk about football though, because even though we were young kids, you still love football. You would still watch it and talk about it. Although when I went to school initially, we're talking before the Premiership kicked in. That was 1992. That would have been when I finished school, before I went to sixth form. This whole video is just making me feel bloody old. But it was so you talked about what you watched the night before, what you were looking forward to watching, or sharing tips on TV and things like that. That would usually wait to the journey on the way back from school, because you were that much nearer to the evening's TV and you were always in a bloody good mood. Sorry, Windy Pops, a lash of chili then, if you will. But yeah, trading VHS tapes and stuff like that. And obviously in 1989, when I would have been a second year, third year, and we had Sky Movies and stuff like that, because I've done a Nostalgic Memories of satellite TV before, but you would tape movies off Sky Movies and you'd share them with your mates at school who didn't necessarily have Sky Movies, because obviously they were still behind what you could rent. If you rented a movie, you could only keep it for a couple of days, apart from those of us who allegedly could tape to tape, circumvent macrovision, if you will. But once you had access to Sky Movies, you could tape, and so you would share them with your mates, and you essentially became like a mini video store, if you know what I mean. Because that was the other great thing about this. When I said it was like a class system, it was almost like it was, comics, books, lending, stuff like that, toys, video games and movies. All this trading, all this stuff was going on. It was essentially a shop, basically, that rented games, movies, books, toys, comics, stuff like that. I remember great conversations about comics, because even back then I was massively into Amazing Spider-Man. Tom McFarlane forever will be my favourite, Spider-Man artist. And also I used to read the Beano, and I used to read 2000 AD religiously, and my mate Luke Buckland was massively into Marvel Comics as well. And we used to trade books. It's funny, we used to trade books, and then years later I'd end up trading back the books that I traded to him in the first place, because I always regretted it, and we managed to work out a deal for me to get them back that was also beneficiary to him. That was great. Honestly, that was really, really, good times. Loved that. So yeah, this whole ecosystem, again, wrong descriptive term, going on, that you were trading all these things with your mates and stuff like that. And then obviously it would go from like Spectrum to the Master System, but I'm pretty sure I was the only person I knew, apart from one other kid. There were obviously more. It wasn't like my imported Mega Drive, because the Master System was officially available at this point. Yeah, there was no one on my school bus who had Master System games, but I would trade them with someone at school. And as you would do when you're a kid, coming home in the evening when you've got it, and also going in the morning, that unbearable feeling, which is, will they have that game? Will they have that game? I really want to play Golden Axe on the Master System. What a relief it was when you got it. But yeah, you would, like, a couple of reasons. You would read the back, even though the Master System was 4 different languages and each one was just a little blurb like that. There's only so many times you can read it. But as a kid, it was the law. when you got a game, whether it was on the school bus or it was coming home with your mum when you've been to the shops, that you would just read the back continuously over and over and over again. Mainly to kill the journey till you could pop it in and play it, but also as if somehow it was going to give you a direct insight to it, because this is pre-internet. You relied religiously on word of mouth. When you don't have that many mates who have the same system as you, you're a bit screwed then. All the magazines that you could read. And obviously back then, initially with the Master System, it was just a couple of pages in the middle of CVG, Mean Machines, before it became its own magazine, that covered all the, the consoles. Because obviously in 1987, at least in this country, this is when consoles really started to kick in and become, big stuff. But the other reason you would, break out your game was to show everyone else, look, I'm reading the back, but what I'm actually doing is letting you all know that I've got a Sega Master System. Look at this game, I'm fucking cool. Not a Spectrum boy anymore, not a Spectrum boy. So that was kind of stupid, but also like I get comics, as I said, and then you get videotapes of people. I remember when we got Roadhouse, before it was on Sky Movies, one of my mates lent it to me. And that was a big deal for some reason, that movie back then. I don't know why. I mean, it's a great movie, don't get me wrong. I fucking love Roadhouse. Fucking love Roadhouse. But yeah, that was another one to be like, and also 18 certificate? Who cared that this 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 12-year-old 1989, he had an 18 rated movie. Even teachers didn't give a shit. As long as you did it before the lesson or after the lesson, you weren't, shoving it around during the lesson. They really couldn't give a shit. I don't think anyone ever, probably if they had not, obviously it would have been, confiscated. But I don't think anyone ever got a videotape confiscated them off school. As long as as I said, it was done before or after the class. So that was another great thing. You see these tapes and stuff like that, and then there'd be kids you didn't even know, but you see them exchanging tapes, and it was something you really, really wanted. May not have been on Sky Movies and stuff like that, and whatever reason, maybe your parents wouldn't rent it to me. They would never let us rent Rambo for some reason. Told you this millions of times in gameplays and vlogs and everything. Never let us rent Rambo, but let us rent Terminator. Go figure. Which could you argue? I mean, I know the body count is higher in Rambo First Blood Part 2, but let's be honest. It's an 80s movie. It's kind of a little bit farcical. I love it, but it's a bit, yeah, that's not going to happen. I know you could argue that about Terminator, but the way it dealt its violence out, you could argue was more realistic, even though it was a robot. Super more clinical and stuff like that. Yeah, but you see these people there, and like, you'd often just try and work your way into a conversation on the school bus with this person, introduce yourself. They came from a different part of the village, maybe a year older than you, a year younger than you. You certainly didn't talk to the kids at the back of the bus when you were in your, working your way up through the class system. You would never do that, but you see them with like all kinds of cool shit. And there was a certain group of them, like the metal kids, they'd all have those satchels. They were like army kit bag satchels, and you would whitewash the back of them and then you draw pictures on it and shit and paint it. I always thought that was so fucking cool. Did it myself towards the end of my schooling career, but especially the kids at the back that had all 2000 AD artwork and Judge Dredd. I fucking loved that, and almost I was like, but I read Judge Dredd. Maybe I should introduce myself. Can't. They're at the back of the bus, Dave. Obey the class system. But you would kind of forge new friendships on the bus as well. Mainly so you could get your hands on this, knowing that the kid had a certain collection of things and stuff like that. And the other great one was you'd share music, because you all had Walkmans. You were allowed to take a Walkman to school. Again, you were allowed to take a Walkman to school as long as it only basically, came out at lunch. Not really morning break, what's the point? Lunch, or you used it on the bus in the morning or on the way home, and it was a godsend. And also tape to taping albums and stuff, and borrowing albums off people was another brilliant fucking thing that I really look forward to. And discovering bands through people. I discovered Def Leppard through Luke Buckland, and it became like literally to this day one of my favourite bands. And what a fucking big deal Hysteria was when I was at school. And obviously that's 87, and 87 was when I was a first year, and he told me about it, and then we got it from the local library, and then we copied it, because you used to get tapes from the library for free, and then you copy it. I think they knew everyone did that, but who cared? It was great. And yeah, so that was another one. You'd come across bands and music and things that would shape your music taste for the rest of your life, at least mine, through the people you talk to on the school bus. And then, like I said, coming home, that was the real big one. And then you'd start, as you get older and older and older, start to look forward and share TV programs that were coming up on that night. I mean, me and Luke he got me into MASH. Obviously, it's an incredibly old show. Ran longer than the war it's based on. I love MASH. I've got all the DVD box sets of it. Just thought I'd let you know that. But he got me into MASH because after, 6:30 on BBC Two, the news would be on one channel, but BBC Two would show early evening entertainment, and it was a weird half hour or an hour block broken down into two half hours of just, I don't know who the demographic was for it. I'm pretty sure it wasn't school kids, but it was what we all watched, and there was stuff like Babylon 5 was on Channel 4, things like that. That was brilliant. Loved Babylon 5. Reruns of Battlestar Galactica. That was another great one. And then obviously there was MASH, which Luke always said to me, you got to watch MASH, you got to watch MASH. And I fell in love with it. So like TV was, influenced again by your mates and this journey on the school bus. And honestly, seriously, more so than anything that happened in the breaks at school. I mean, we read computer magazines, stuff like that, and I've talked about that. But my TV viewing habits were shaped by the school bus. And so when it got to like 1989, 1990, Luke introduced me to another show that became an absolute love of mine, one of my favourite shows of all time. And again, yeah, it was down to Luke Buckland. I have no idea why I never knew this was a thing, because it was right up my alley, and it would be something that would start at 9 o'clock, because then there'd be a bunch of shows on BBC One. Well, News would be BBC One, BBC Two, BBC would have a bunch of shows every night at 9 o'clock in an hour slot. 45 minutes, because there was no breaks or commercials on BBC Two. And Tuesday, 9 o'clock, Quantum Leap. Luke got me into that. Again, something he talked to me about on the school bus, and the conversations we had, because I don't know if he had Sky when we first had it, and I lent this to him, but I lent it to him because he'd seen this movie, second favourite movie of all time. See if you can guess it before I say what it is. My second favourite movie of all time, I should say. And yeah, we used to have such endless conversations about this, and how utterly disappointed we were when the shite second one came out, because we were still ran about at school at that time. But Highlander, never knew anything about it other than my dad's business partner said it was fucking amazing. When I used to work in the garage on a Saturday, have a Nostalgic Memories video of that, Saturday morning jobs. And yeah, so our dad taped it for us, and we watched it, and I fell in love with it, and I talked to Luke about it, and then he'd seen it, and he fucking loved it to the same extent as me, and we used to just quote it endlessly on the school bus till everyone else would look at us and have no idea what we're talking about, but we didn't care, because Highlander is the second greatest movie ever made in the history of mankind after Back to the Future, which I used to discuss a great deal with people, because it's always been my favourite movie of all time. But yeah, so TV shows, stuff like that, recommendations, music, borrowing tapes, it was like a library on wheels. I am aware that libraries on wheels do actually exist, but it was fantastic, because all these different kids with different tastes in everything that I've mentioned up to this point in this video, they were a tap of resources for you, if that makes sense, or resources on tap for you, but all you had to do was become friends with them. And when I say it, make it sound like it's so shallow and shit like that, become friends with them. Half the time these friendships became proper, go around your mate's house after school for tea, play some video games, watch some TV, friendships, but yeah, all this shit began on the school bus. So when I hear that people these days don't get to, and obviously there were people back then who didn't get to go on the school bus, who lived, if you lived out in the middle of nowhere in Chew Magna, fucking hell, boring times. But yeah, never got to go on the school bus. And that to me is such a shame, because like I said, I've not done it justice in the video, because much like my vlogs, I never plan them, I just sit down and speak off the cuff. But I just have so many great memories, of sharing everything that I've mentioned in this: music, TV, swapping food with people, trading food, trading snacks. Who remembers that? Trading snacks on the school bus and listening to music on your Walkman, because we all had days, even as kids, where you were a pissed off little bastard and you didn't want to talk to anyone, so in went your headphones. And yeah, so I have such fond memories of the school bus being, especially as I mentioned at the start of this video, since I was alright at school, I never disliked school. Yeah, it was a part of the memories I have associated with school that were good, were brilliant, were absolutely fantastic. It was, if anything, that combined sort of 25, 30, maybe 35 minutes a day. That combined 35 minutes a day of the back and forth to and from school. I probably remember fondly, I shit you not, than school. Obviously, I love the argument. There'd be playground war arguments on the bus as well, and obviously magazines is something I should have touched upon on this, but that kind of was more so in lunchtime because you wanted to argue with the kids. My most predominant playground wars, which if you watch the channel you know about, were kids who came from different parts, of the local area, the valley, if you will, the Chew Valley area. So they, you save your magazines for lunch because they were in your form. That's where your big playground wars, but would kick off and stuff like that. You got an Amiga, I got a Mega Drive. Sucks to be you and shit like that. I am aware the majority of my gameplays recently have been Amiga gameplays. You know what I mean? But yeah, you would read magazines on the school bus as well, not just comics and stuff like that. Like the Marvel comics I mentioned. I read CVG and then Mean Machines and stuff like that. But yeah, I genuinely have more strong, fond memories and nostalgia for the bus journeys than I do the school. What does that say? School memories. What does that say? Like 35 minutes of your day compared to 5-6 hours of your day. 7 hours. 7 hours. 6 hours. I don't know. I can't remember. I was ickle. But you know what I mean. The point being, chunk of hours compared to a 35 minutes, round commute. But I absolutely loved it, and I think it's such a shit. I think everyone, obviously, it helps if they like school. I think everyone should have, the ability to get a bus to and from school, one that's provided for them, not actually because obviously kids probably do this, get on an actual bus service and go to school. No, one that's provided genuinely, because this was provided, it cost us nothing, was genuinely, was provided for us by the local council and cost us nothing. Well, you could argue that's what your your taxes pay for, and stuff like that, and your rates. But yeah, I think that kids who never got to go to school on a bus, and it's something that's global as well. My understanding is anyway. So yeah, I think that is a great part of your childhood, and I think everyone should have, based on my memories that I love, have the ability to go to school on a bus with a bunch of the other kids that they went to school with, including a sprinkling of your best mates, because they are some of my fondest memories from my childhood back in the day. This video got away from me, but it's something that I did want to talk about because I've touched upon it a few times, but I've never really got into how much I loved my school bus rides. And so, anyway, as always, I'd love to know what you think. Unless apparently I'm the only one who has these fond memories and this nostalgia for the bus journeys. I'm completely on my own. But unless you, as well, it was a big part of your day too. The journeys with your mates, and like I said, everything that you would swap and trade and eat and shit and swear and stuff like that. Not necessarily the shitting part, obviously. But yeah, I'd love to know if it is, it's like it is a thing everywhere, and if you have memories of it. And as always, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you later.